Thanksgiving, or Thanksgiving Day, is a public holiday celebrated on the fourth Thursday in November in the United States. It originated as a harvest festival. Thanksgiving has been celebrated nationally on and off since 1789, after a proclamation by George Washington. It has been celebrated as a federal holiday every year since 1863, when, during the American Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln proclaimed a national day of thanksgiving and praise to our beneficent Father who dwelleth in the heavens, to be celebrated on the last Thursday in November together with Christmas and the New Year. Thanksgiving is a part of the broader holiday season. The event that Americans commonly call the first Thanksgiving was celebrated by the Pilgrims after their first harvest in the New World in 1621. This feast lasted 3 days, and, as accounted by attendee Edward Winslow, it was attended by 90 Native Americans and 53 Pilgrims. The New England colonists were accustomed to regularly celebrating Thanksgiving's days of prayer, thanking God for blessings such as military victory or the end of a drought. In September 1620, a small ship called the Mayflower left Plymouth, England, carrying 102 passengers, an assortment of religious separatists seeking a new home where they could freely practice their faith, and other individuals lured by the promise of prosperity and land ownership in the New World. After a treacherous and uncomfortable crossing that lasted 66 days, they dropped anchor near the tip of Cape Cod, far north of their intended destination at the mouth of the Hudson River. 1 month later, the Mayflower crossed Massachusetts Bay, where the Pilgrims, as they are now commonly known, began the work of establishing a village at Plymouth. Throughout that first brutal winter, most of the colonists remained on board the ship, where they suffered from exposure, scurvy and outbreaks of contagious disease. Only half of the Mayflower's original passengers and crew lived to see their first New England spring. In March, the remaining settlers moved ashore, where they received an astonishing visit from an Abenaki Indian who greeted them in English. Several days later, he returned with another Native American, Squinto, a member of the Pawtuxet tribe who had been kidnapped by an English sea captain and sold into slavery before escaping to London and returning to his homeland on an exploratory expedition. Squinto taught the Pilgrims, weakened by malnutrition and illness, how to cultivate corn, extract sap from maple trees, catch fish in the rivers and avoid poisonous plants. He also helped the settlers forge an alliance with the Wampanoag, a local tribe, which would endure for more than 50 years and tragically remains one of the sole examples of harmony between European colonists and Native Americans. In November 1621, after the Pilgrims' first corn harvest proved successful, Governor William Bradford organized a celebratory feast and invited a group of the fledgling colony's Native American allies, including the Wampanoag chief Massasoit. Now remembered as Americans' first Thanksgiving. Although the Pilgrims themselves may not have used the term at the time, the festival lasted for 3 days. While no record exists of the historic banquet's exact menu, the Pilgrim chronicler Edward Winslow wrote in his journal that Governor Bradford sent 4 men on a fowling mission in preparation for the event, and that the Wampanoag guests arrived bearing 5 deer. Historians have suggested that many of the dishes were likely prepared using traditional Native American spices and cooking methods. Because the Pilgrims had no oven and the Mayflower's sugar supply had dwindled by the fall of 1621, the meal did not feature pies, cakes or other desserts, which have become a hallmark of contemporary celebrations. Each year on the fourth Thursday in November, Americans gather for a day of feasting, football and family. While today's Thanksgiving celebrations would likely be unrecognizable to attendees of the original 1621 harvest meal, it continues to be a day for Americans to come together around the table, albeit with some updates to Pilgrim's menu. The first Thanksgiving service known to be held by Europeans in North America occurred on May 27, 1578 in Newfoundland, although earlier church-type services were probably held by Spaniards in La Florida. However, for British New England, some historians believe that the Popham colony in Maine conducted a Thanksgiving service in 1607, see sources, Griff, 208, 209, Gould, and Hatch. In the same year, Jamestown colonists gave thanks for their safe arrival, and another service was held in 1610 when a Supply ship arrived after a harsh winter. Berkeley 100 settlers held a Thanksgiving service in accordance with their charter, which stated that the day of their arrival in Virginia should be observed yearly as a day of Thanksgiving, but within a few years an Indian uprising ended further services. Dabney. Thus British colonists held several Thanksgiving services in America before the Pilgrims' celebration in 1621. The Pilgrims, with a puritanical rejection of public religious display, held a non-religious Thanksgiving feast, aside from saying grace. In fact, they seem to have used the 3 days for feasting, playing games, and even drinking liquor. In 1623, the Pilgrims at Plymouth Plantation, Massachusetts, held another day of Thanksgiving. As a drought was destroying their crops, colonists prayed and fasted for relief. The rains came a few days later. And not long after, Captain Miles Standish arrived with staples and news that a Dutch supply ship was on its way. Because of all this good fortune, colonists held a day of Thanksgiving and prayer on June 30th. This 1623 festival appears to have been the origin of our Thanksgiving Day because it combined a religious and social celebration. Festivals of Thanksgiving were observed sporadically on a local level for more than 150 years. They tended to be autumn harvest celebrations. But in 1789, Elias Bowden of Massachusetts, member of the House of Representatives, moved that a day of Thanksgiving be held to thank God for giving the American people the opportunity to create a constitution to preserve their hard-won freedoms. A Congressional Joint Committee approved the motion, and informed President George Washington. On October 3, 1789, the President proclaimed that the people of the United States observe a day of public thanksgiving and prayer on Thursday, the 26th of November. Barack Obama pardoned his last turkey as U.S. President on Wednesday, but his daughters should beware. He plans to continue the tradition as a private citizen. Obama, who leaves office in January, has followed the annual tradition of pardoning a turkey every year before the Thanksgiving Day holiday, which many Americans celebrate with a turkey dinner. His daughters, Malia and Sasha, often join their father for the tongue-in-cheek Rose Garden ceremony. Not this year. President-elect Donald Trump shared a message of unity Wednesday in a video published on the official White House transition team's YouTube page. In the video, Trump acknowledges the long and bruising political season and says he understands that emotional divides don't heal overnight. It's my prayer that on this Thanksgiving, we begin to heal our divisions and move forward as one country, strengthened by shared purpose and very, very common resolve, Trump says. The video is one of a handful of times the nation has heard from the president-elect at length since his victory. Trump also emphasized the importance of bringing prosperity to the country's inner cities. We have before us the chance now to make history together. To bring real change to Washington, real safety to our cities and real prosperity to our communities, including our inner cities, so important to me, and so important to our country, Trump says. Trump will spend his Thanksgiving at Mar-a-Lago in Florida, along with his family. It's time to restore the bond of trust between citizens, because when America is unified there is nothing beyond our reach, Trump concluded. Vice President-elect Mike Pence expressed his gratitude Thursday for family, friends, freedom and faith. Today, we give thanks for the many blessings in our lives, family, friends, freedom and faith. From our family to yours, happy Thanksgiving, he tweeted.